in the sun-drenched cul-de-sacs of Willow Creek Estates. Everything looked picture-perfect on the surface. Manicured lawns rolled out like green carpets. American flags fluttered at the exact 45-degree angle mandated by Section 4.2 of the Covenants. And every mailbox wore the same brushed nickel finish approved by the Architectural Review Committee. But beneath that Instagram-ready calm lurked the iron fist of the Homeowners Association. And its president, Karen Ellison, ruled with a smile sharper than her stiletto heels. I was Emily Carter, the freelance graphic designer who kept her head down, paid her dues on time, and somehow ended up as Karen's personal safety net. For years ago, the housing market had taken a nosedive after interest rates spiked. Karen's 6-bedroom monstrosity, the one with the 3-story foyer and the pool shaped like a kidney bean, was suddenly 2 payments behind. She cornered me at the annual spring HOA mixer, voice trembling just enough to seem human. "Emily, darling, you're the only one I trust in this whole neighborhood. It's temporary. 6 months tops until my listings pick back up. Brandon's coaching income is a joke, and the girls' private academy fees are killing us. Just $2,500 a month. You'd be saving the entire board from embarrassment if the president lost her house to foreclosure." I should have laughed. Instead, I heard my late mother's voice echoing through every small-town upbringing story she ever told. Neighbors stick together. No applause needed. So, the next morning, I wired the first $2,500 from my emergency fund, watching my own dream of a quiet home office upgrade vanish in a single click. Karen sent a bouquet of overpriced roses the same week with a handwritten note. "You're the glue holding this community together." Never forget that. For 12 straight months, she called every Sunday, updating me on potential closings, inviting me to dinner where Brandon raised a glass to the best neighbor a president could ask for. The HOA even waived my annual flagpole inspection fee as a thank you. I told myself the sacrifice was building something stronger than brick. By year 2, the gratitude had thinned like cheap paint. Karen rolled up in a gleaming white Lexus SUV she swore was essential for client impressions, while I kept driving my 10-year-old sedan with the HOA-approved bumper sticker. She jetted off to a Bahamas agent summit she called networking, posting poolside selfies with captions about elevating the neighborhood brand. My own condo hunting apps gathered digital dust because every extra dollar now funneled straight to her mortgage. I picked up overflow corporate branding gigs, editing vector files until my eyes burned at 2 a.m., surviving on instant ramen because cooking felt like a luxury I couldn't schedule. Year 3 brought open hostility disguised as HOA enforcement. Karen started citing me for visual clutter because my bird feeder hung 2 inches too low. The fine arrived in the same envelope as her mortgage payment due date. I paid both without complaint, convincing myself it was still temporary. Meanwhile, her social media glowed with photos of a newly renovated kitchen, imported quartz, custom cabinetry, captioned "Elevating the home for better resale value." Not a single mention of the invisible woman keeping the roof over that quartz. By the 4th year, any pretense of appreciation had evaporated. Karen hosted open houses that drew crowds from the upscale side of Charlotte, yet never once acknowledged the support propping up those events. I skipped a weekend design conference, canceled a much-needed dentist appointment, and watched my friends drift away after too many rain-check trivia nights. Only my old college roommate Lena, a night shift nurse, knew the full truth. Over cheap diner coffee, she stirred her cup and said, "You're burning yourself alive for a woman who finds you for birdseed. When are you going to realize she's using you as an ATM with better landscaping?" I defended the arrangement out of habit, community first, right? But her words stuck like burrs in the perfect grass. Cousin Megan, a corporate attorney, pulled me aside at the neighborhood barbecue and whispered, "Karen's bragging about record commissions again. Are you sure this is sustainable on your end? I changed the subject, unwilling to admit the strain had already hollowed me out. Then came the 4th of July block party, the crown jewel of Karen's social calendar. She had texted 2 weeks earlier. Emily, darling, come early and help with the spread. It'll impress the potential buyers touring later. Community spirit and all that. I arrived at dawn with grocery bags of ribs and corn, setting up folding tables under the pergola while Brandon fired up the massive grill he rarely touched. Guests trickled in, developers in linen shirts, investors sipping craft beer, couples eyeing luxury listings clipped to a display board near the pool. Karen glided between groups in a sundress and heels, handing out branded water bottles and collecting business cards like trophies. I manned the smoker for 6 straight hours, basting sauce, rotating racks, sweat soaking my tank top, refilling ice buckets, wiping counters after spills no one noticed. When a curious buyer asked who kept the food coming, Karen steered the conversation back to square footage and school districts, laughing at jokes about market flips while I hauled trash bags to the curb. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the patio strung with red, white, and blue banners. I finally stepped away to rinse charcoal from my hands at the outdoor sink, ears tuning to chatter drifting from the fire pit area. Karen stood with a cluster of suited men near the built-in bar, gesturing animatedly about a recent closing. Her voice carried over the music, loud enough for the whole patio to hear. My neighbor Emily is sweet, but honestly zero drive. Total loser in this market. Polite chuckles rippled through the group. One man raised his glass and mock toast. Another added something about surrounding yourself with winners. I froze with a paper towel in hand, the laughter slicing sharper than any HOA fine I'd ever received. Karen never glanced my way. She simply pivoted to discuss golf memberships while Brandon joined the circle. The spatula I'd been gripping suddenly felt heavier than the mortgage I'd been carrying for 4 years. I untied the apron, folded it neatly, and placed it beside the sink without a word. The drive home blurred under streetlights. Windows down, radio off, letting highway air scrub the barbecue smoke from my hair. 4 years of transfers flashed across my dashboard like accusatory receipts, skipped vacations, postponed repairs on my own patio that the HOA would have approved if I'd had the cash. The growing gap in my retirement contributions. Karen's casual dismissal replayed on loop, wrapped in that perfect president smile for strangers who saw me as background staff. By the time I parked in my driveway, perfectly edged with HOA-compliant mulch, the decision had crystallized into cold clarity. No confrontation, no dramatic scene. The math spoke louder than any voicemail ever could. Inside my modest ranch, I opened the banking app, stared at the scheduled transfer set for the first, thumb hovering, then closed the screen. Sleep came fitfully on the couch, shoes still on. Morning light filtered through the blinds as I drafted notes on my laptop outlining new freelance rates to replace the outgoing sum. Lena had warned about burnout months ago. Megan's boundary talk suddenly made perfect sense. Monday morning, I composed the email before my first client call. Subject line, update on monthly neighborhood support. Body kept short and neutral. Effective this month. The transfers will stop. Wishing you well managing independently. I hit send from the coffee shop near the community entrance, watching the confirmation pop while stirring cream into a to-go cup. The reply came within minutes. Karen's name flashing on my screen with a voicemail that started calm and escalated into pure venom. How dare you blindside me like this after everything I've done for this community, she yelled. Background noise suggesting she paced her marble-floored office. Accusations flew about betrayal and timing. Threats of reviewing your file for covenant violations, mixed with pleas to reconsider for the sake of neighborhood stability. I let play on speaker, volume low enough the barista didn't notice. I didn't delete it. Brandon followed with a string of texts, each more unhinged. You're destroying our future over some petty grudge. Another demanded a call like adults and warned about community reputation in our circles. I screenshot the chain, fingers steady, then navigated to settings and blocked both numbers. The silence that settled felt immediate, my phone no longer buzzing against the table like an angry wasp. Lena met me for lunch at the deli across from the hospital, sliding into the booth still in scrubs. She listened to the recap over turkey sandwiches, eyes narrowing at the voicemail transcript. You set a boundary, plain and simple, she said firmly, pushing a napkin sketch of a stick figure wall between us. That's self-respect, not selfishness. Hold the line. Dad, well, my actual dad, who still lived across town, rang that evening while I prepped dinner. He'd heard from Karen in tears, confused about the sudden cutoff, worried the girls were fighting over money again. She'd painted it as me abandoning the neighborhood in its hour of need. I kept responses measured, assuring him the decision came after careful thought without diving into specifics. He sighed about keeping peace, but didn't push, ending with an offer to mediate if needed. Mom stayed quiet on the extension. Her breathing said everything her words didn't. Karen tried an alternate number the next day, leaving a calmer message about discussing a repayment plan once commission stabilized. I forwarded it straight to trash. Brandon switched to email, attaching the girls' school supply list as emotional leverage, items underlined in pink marker. I extended the block to that address too. Lena checked in via video after her night rotation. Dark circles under her eyes, but tone rock solid. They'll test every door until one sticks, she warned. Document everything. 3 weeks later, the first official letter arrived at Karen's address. The bank flagged multiple refinances on the property, 3 in 18 months, each pulling extra equity for renovations, and that ridiculous boat docked at the community marina. Without my monthly cushion, the loan-to-income ratio violated terms, triggering a notice of default demanding full past-due amounts within 30 days or acceleration. Karen scrambled to list new properties, but the market stayed sluggish for high-end homes. Brandon dug through closets for anything sellable, posting custom golf clubs on local apps and netting barely $8,000 after fees, nowhere near the $42,000 IRS lien that hit next. The tax notice cited unreported deductions on prior returns, common in real estate but fatal when audited. State regulators suspended Karen's real estate license for 6 months pending payment plan approval. She appealed through industry contacts, arguing clerical errors, while Brandon liquidated tournament trophies and signed lessons at the public course to scrape together partial payments. The neighborhood started to notice. Karen's once pristine lawn began sprouting dandelions tall enough to wave at passing cars. Residents whispered at the mailbox cluster, "Did you see the president's grass?" Section 3.7 clearly states maximum height 2 inches. Someone, probably the same busybody who'd reported my bird feeder, filed a formal complaint. The new vice president, a retired accountant who'd never liked Karen's heavy-handed style, scheduled an emergency board meeting. Karen tried to waive the fine on herself using presidential authority. The board voted her down 4-1. The irony tasted sweeter than any barbecue sauce. Social media turned hostile soon after. Karen posted a vague status about certain neighbors letting the community down when it needs them most, tagging the local agent group for sympathy. Brandon shared a story of the girls' disappointed faces at a canceled dance recital, captioning it "Priorities Shift Without Warning." Comments piled on from their network, strangers assuming entitlement and painting me as the villain who abandoned the neighborhood. Screenshots circulated in private real estate chats speculating my freelance income had dried up out of jealousy. I muted notifications and poured the freed energy into a new contract for a chain of coffee shops needing branded materials. The lien deadline loomed with no resolution. Regulators upheld the suspension until certified proof of payment. Brandon's part-time coaching barely covered groceries, forcing cuts to streaming services and extracurriculars. Megan texted me a screenshot from her office. They refinanced again last year with a HELOC at 12% variable. Interest alone is eating them alive now that cash flow stopped. I thanked her and filed the info away, focusing on my own portfolio growth. Karen attempted side gigs, virtual staging consultations, but without an active license, credibility vanished. Clients ghosted. Dad stopped by my place unannounced one evening with takeout from our old neighborhood spot, setting containers on the counter while avoiding direct questions. He mentioned seeing garage sale signs at Karen's, items priced low to move fast. Wish I could fix this like a leaky pipe, he admitted. Shoulders slumped, before changing topics to mom's garden yields. Ava, Karen's daughter, adjusted to public school transportation. The private academy had become too costly mid-year. Karen's online venting escalated to a live video rant about ungrateful neighbors hiding behind keyboards. Views stayed within her echo chamber of fellow agents facing similar slumps, validating the narrative that someone else was always at fault. The dominoes kept falling. Each missed payment compounded penalties in a system designed for precision. Karen's pool, once the centerpiece of every block party, now sat half empty with algae blooming along the edges. Another violation of Section 6.4, water features must remain pristine. The board issued a $500 fine. When Karen tried to veto it, the members called an emergency vote and stripped her of presidential powers, pending a full investigation into financial irregularities affecting community governance. I watched it all from my quiet front porch, sipping iced tea. The HOA newsletter I used to design for free, now sporting a new editor's name. The woman who had spent years enforcing ridiculous rules, banning political flags after 3 days, limiting garden gnomes to 3, dictating mulch color, now stood in her own driveway arguing with the very enforcement crew she once commanded. The dark comedy wrote itself. The Queen of Covenants reduced to pleading with her own subjects while her lawn turned into a meadow. 90 days after the cutoff, the county courthouse steps hosted the foreclosure auction under a gray sky. Bidders clustered with paddles, flicking for Karen's property listed at a fraction of its peak value. No contero fer servist. The bank claimed title the moment the gavel fell. Eviction notice taped to the front door within days. They packed belongings into a rented truck, downsizing to a 2-bedroom apartment in an older complex off Tryon Road, where rent consumed half of Brandon's irregular coaching checks. Karen's license suspension turned permanent when the IRS lien remained unpaid past appeals. Regulators cited repeated noncompliance. She took an administrative role at a small firm downtown processing paperwork for $45,000 a year, less than one prior commission. The office cubicle lacked windows. Fluorescent lights hummed over stacks of closing folders she once delegated. Brandon shifted to part-time lessons at the municipal course, scheduling around peak tea times that rarely filled. He stored clubs in the apartment closet, trading personalized fittings for generic rentals. Ava picked up weekend babysitting shifts, stuffing tips into a jar for school clothes. After the private academy became unaffordable, she learned to stretch grocery budgets, comparing unit prices at the discount store. The girl who once asked why Aunt Emily didn't have a pool like theirs now understood exactly why. Meanwhile, my own world quietly expanded. I closed on a modest upgrade within Willow Creek. Same HOA, different street. Mortgage payments lower than the old transfers thanks to steady contracts from my expanded network. The kitchen featured new appliances I chose myself. A spare room doubled as an office with natural light, streaming through upgraded windows the Architectural Review Committee actually approved without Karen's meddling. I installed floating shelves for design awards earned post-cutoff, each plaque a marker of reclaimed focus. Mom dropped by with containers of homemade stew, setting them on the counter while admiring the fresh paint. "You protected your future," she said simply. No lectures attached. We shared coffee on the balcony overlooking the rail trail, conversation flowing to books and local events. She brought cuttings from her backyard herbs, planting them in pots I lined along the railing. Lena celebrated my housewarming with a potted plant and takeout from the food hall, toasting to boundaries that actually hold. Dad mentioned seeing Karen's moving truck from afar, but kept distance, respecting the divide. He sent a text congratulating the new address, adding a photo of his latest plumbing project. A handwritten letter arrived forwarded from my old address. Karen's script pleaded for a loan to restart, citing Ava's college fund dreams and promising formal repayment with interest. Enclosed photos showed the cramped apartment, living room furniture mismatched from discount lots. I read it once in the mailbox area, then slipped it into a drawer without response. Phone contacts stayed blocked. Social accounts unfollowed years prior. Karen attempted freelance consulting under a friend's license, but clients demanded credentials she lacked. Brandon's golf network dried up with reputation hits from public records. Ava balanced homework and evening sits, learning budgeting from scraped allowances. My freelance roster grew to include national brands. Rates reflected experience without the drain of unspoken obligations. The lesson stood stark in the perfectly edged lawns of Willow Creek. Support flows both ways, but one-sided extraction collapses the bridge for everyone. Kindness without limits becomes enablement. Boundaries preserve dignity on all sides, especially when the person demanding them once weaponized the rulebook against you. Months later, the community settled into a new rhythm. The new HOA president, a retired teacher with zero tolerance for drama, repealed 3 of Karen's most ridiculous rules within her first meeting. Residents joked that the dandelion meadow at Karen's old address had finally forced everyone to admit the covenants had gone too far. I even got a polite thank you card from the board for years of quiet service, which felt like the universe winking. Karen's new apartment complex sat just outside Willow Creek's gates, close enough that she still drove past every morning on her way to the cubicle job. Sometimes I'd see her at the discount grocery, comparing unit prices with the same intensity she once used to scrutinize mulch color. The woman who once glided through block parties in designer heels now pushed a cart with a wobbly wheel. Ava trailing behind, learning life the hard way. One afternoon, I ran into Brandon at the public golf course while dropping off a client's brand of merchandise. He looked smaller somehow, shoulders rounded, clubs rented instead of custom. He nodded once. No words exchanged, but the defeat in his eyes said everything the voicemails never could. The empire built on other people's money and other people's silence had finally met its own bylaws. I never gloated. I simply lived, hosting small design meetups on my upgraded patio, watching the sun set over lawns I no longer feared. Lena and Megan came for barbecues now, laughing about the old days while the new HOA president waved from across the street. Dad sent plumbing jokes via text. Mom planted herbs that actually thrived because I finally had time to water them. The letter from Karen gathered dust in the drawer. Another artifact of a chapter closed. Their facade had crumbled under unchecked debt layers. Each refinance a temporary patch on a leaking foundation. Without the external prop, reality enforced harsh recalibration, lost home, diminished careers, child learning budgeting from scraped allowances. I thrived in self-built stability, choices mine alone. And every time I passed the old Ellison mansion, now occupied by a young family who actually paid their own mortgage, I felt the quiet satisfaction of a story that finally balanced its own books. The neighborhood looked the same on the surface, flags at 45 degrees. Lawns at 2 inches, but underneath, something had shifted. The Karen who once ruled with fear now walked the same sidewalks as everyone else. No longer above the rules, she wrote. If you've ever carried someone else's weight while they fined you for existing, you know exactly how sweet that final chapter tastes. Family, blood, or block party only works when both sides hold up their end. Otherwise, the whole covenant collapses, one missed payment at a time. Thank you for staying through the entire story. If this resonated, drop a comment. What would you have done the moment you heard that total loser line at the barbecue? Smash like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more real-life HOA Karen turning points where the little guy finally flips the script.